corner of their screen. If you go to the top right corner of the screen and you choose speaker view, you'll have a much better presentation, I believe.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as well. So every year, so I've been in business for 16 years, and every year I have increased my income, even in COVID, and just every year. And one of the things that I do that I attribute this to is at the end of the year, for the last 2 weeks, I don't do any client work, and I sit down and I work on my own business. And what I'm going to share with you today is one of the things that I go through in those couple of weeks. So the one thing I want to know is what marketing I did that year that worked, what marketing didn't work. And here's the biggest thing. To start this whole process, you have to know where your customers are coming from. And if you're not tracking that, you need to start. And since it's still the first quarter, we need to start soon. So what marketing works? Again, take the time every year to go ahead and figure this out. And I'm just going to jump in and share with you what I did. So this is for 2021 only. And the way that I got these numbers or percentages is when I get a new client, I ask every single one how they found me. And they'll say, so-and-so referred me, or I found you on Facebook, or I Googled something to find you. And I'll usually, if they say that, I'll ask them what they Googled and I'll write it down because I want to remember that. Whatever it is they tell me, when I create their profile in my QuickBooks, I go ahead and add it in as a note. So that 5 years from now, if they use me again, I'm going to know how I initially came across that person. Super, super important. The only thing that's a real bummer is QuickBooks doesn't do reporting on that information. So at the end of the year, I export all of that information into Excel. And I have a friend that is a whiz at Excel, and he manipulates, adds all of the formulas and all that stuff, and gives me what I need. So last year, 40% of my income came from networking, which I found amazing. 30% were referrals, and that's a referral from just people, customers, anywhere that the referral came from. If it came directly from a networking group, then it went into the networking bucket. Internet, that is anything on the internet. So it's my website, it's search engine optimization, it's, getting found, Google, all of that stuff. That's all internet. Existing customers are ones that usually have ongoing maintenance, and I'm just doing stuff for them all the time. And then social media, well, we all know what that is. I separated that out from internet because a lot of times there's just different activities associated with that than your general internet bucket. So that's the breakdown for mine. And I used to just stop here, but this year I wanted more information. So the next thing I wanted to know was, out of that 40% networking, what groups actually contributed to that? Do I want to pick up any new ones? Do I want to drop any that aren't working? Those were the questions I wanted answered. So again, in QuickBooks, when someone is a networking source, I know what group I found them from. WPN is an online group. It's mostly on the East Coast. They were 17%. I take the lead as a local Portland, Oregon group, 11%. General networking, these are just people that I might have met somewhere randomly talking to, and they came in. An example of that, believe it or not, I sat next to somebody on an airplane once. 5 years later, they hired me to build a website. That would be general networking. So all of those, as you can see, is significant part of my income. So I certainly wouldn't want to drop any of those. All of the little ones there, those are actually things that I've done in the past that I'm no longer doing. But because I participated in the past and people remembered me, then I got business from them this year. And it could have been like the urban group. That was probably 10 plus years ago. I spoke at that group, and the woman that ran that group, her husband hired me this year to build him a website. So you never know when you're networking when that payoff is going to come around. The next thing I wanted to know is how much money did I spend on these particular buckets to get the business. And the way I did this was in QuickBooks, you can create tags for your expenses. So I basically assigned all of my expenses to the different networking or to the different income buckets that I had to figure out which one cost the most. And you can see the numbers here. But then we take it one step further. And I want to know what my profit is. So networking and referrals are almost exactly the same. And obviously, that's something you're not going to give up in your business. If you do, you're probably not going to make it. Internet is consistently stayed the same percentage of income, and the expenses that I assign to it. It's all roughly about the same. Existing customers, that's pretty obvious. You can't get rid of existing customers. They're still existing. And social media. And people might ask, well, why do you spend any time at all on social media for such a small little piece of the pie? And here's the thing about social media. You're not really there, at least I'm not really there to get a website right now. I'm there so that when someone needs me, I'm already known. So I'm known before I'm needed. And that's, for me, is the whole point of social media. It is to make sure when someone has a friend or a family member that needs a website, they know that I'm the guy or the gal to go to. And the last thing I wanted to kind of share on here, I mean, I learned a lot. I've kind of gone over what I learned, but some of the things, one of the things that stood out to me while I was analyzing all of this is that out of all my referral types, some, yes, are more profitable than others. So I need to figure out how to get more from the referral type that is the most profitable. But I didn't lose money on any of them. And so when I first came into this project this year, I wanted to know, is there anything I need to drop so that I can do more of the things that are making me money? And I realized the only thing on here that would make any sense at all to drop is social media, which I'm not dropping. And I didn't lose money on it. So, I'm going to continue to do it. The question is, I spent most of my time on Facebook as far as time goes, but yet the money that I actually made from that was from Alignable and from LinkedIn. So instead of spending a lot of time on Facebook, I'm shifting and spending more time on those other two platforms. And the reason for that is that's where the customers that came from social media directly, those are the two platforms they came from. So that, I think, is probably close to my 10 minutes. Did we have any questions on anything? I know that was super fast.
Very thought-provoking. I have a number of follow-up questions in my head, but I should go last and let the rest of the audience go ahead of me. Who's got a question for Dotty? You can just type it into chat or unmute yourself and speak up or raise your hand, whatever. Yes, Bill. And Bill, we're unable to hear you, sir. You have failed the microphone check. While Bill's getting his mic up.
Right. Bill, try muting and unmuting again.
I had a question for you, Dotty. In terms of the setup, I heard you say tags.
Uh-huh.
Every time I've looked at tags, I feel like I'm about to fall down a rabbit hole. Like there's an infinite amount of tagging one can do, and I don't know how to set up my taxonomy. How did you get that right?
So I actually set that up this year.
Okay.
When I was going through this process. Like I said, in the years past, I stopped at where my business came from. So when I enter in an expense in QuickBooks, on that screen, there is a way to add a tag.
Right.
I created tags that went with my different income.
Okay, so you'd already done
Category.
the analysis, you know what your categories were, and now you just want to make sure that your spending can be mapped one-to-one to the income
Correct.
categories. And that's how you
The only
unify
thing
the
that
process.
wasn't mapped one-to-one is I had an overhead tag.
Sure.
And what I did on that one is I took my percentages from my first screen there and I assigned my overhead based on percentages.
Just peanut butter spread that out across
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, makes sense.
So I'm not super technical on that.
Well, speak for yourself. I have no tags, so you're certainly ahead of me. Anybody have any comments or just notes of
Dotty,
admiration?
On
Paul.
the last slide, the last bullet, the last sentence, he said something about making sure it's a complete business. What did you mean by that?
Oh, what the sentence says is, I realize that I need all of these referral types to have a complete business. Like if I took any of those, the chunks of pie out of my pie charts, I would not, my business isn't going to roll on a wheel, it's going to clunk. So you got to have a rounded referral source or income sources instead of relying on one or two. The more you can have, the better you are,
Okay.
or the better off your business is.
Beautiful. Yeah, Bill, if you've got another question, go ahead and type it in maybe, since it looks like we're going to continue to struggle to get your audio working. And I'm going to keep things open here for a minute or two, just to see who else besides Bill may have a follow-up question for Dotty. Yeah, John.
I think there's some in the chat, but I just want to jump in here real quick. When you were looking at the difference between Facebook and LinkedIn, you're more of a B2B type business. Do you find that Facebook is better suited for B2C type businesses versus B2B, or did you look into that any deeper, or just kind of anecdotal experience suggested that more leads were coming from LinkedIn than from Facebook?
Well, I know more leads are coming from LinkedIn because I ask when someone tells me they found me on social media. However, that being said, on the internet, it is really hard to quantify what one thing made it so that they found you. Because if you're talking about, getting found in a search engine, you got to have reviews, you have to have social media, you have to have all these different things that you're participating in, and all of them can manipulate how your pages are ranked. So it's hard to say quantitatively social media was only 1%, because some of those I found you on the internet could have been because of a social media post that got ranked on the internet, which, because I use video, a lot of my posts show up independently of the actual platform. So there's a lot of that in there.
Sure.
But to answer your question, as a consumer, most people have profiles. And on Facebook, a profile is protected from the search engines. They're not ranked or listed anything in there. As I have business groups and I have business pages, and those are open so that they can be indexed in a search engine. Therefore, it's really hard to answer your question.
Sure.
And I'm going to ask that we.
I went all the way around that tree, I think.
Well, you
Can I
covered about
jump
as well as
in here?
anybody. I'm going to ask that we hold those comments until after we get our second speaker taken care of, because we're at 23 after the hour, running about 7 minutes late. And I want to make sure we have our main speaker on. We're going to go till 5:30. So we'll have a good half hour of additional talk time to cover these other questions, including Bill, your question, which I'm going to table for now. In the interest of giving our main speaker his allotted time, I ask you to turn your attention now, please, to Harvey Meier. Dr. Harvey Meier CMC is a certified management consultant. In fact, he achieved that designation in 1993. He is a trusted ally, a confidant of CEOs as well as consultants like us. And he's going to tell us his mindsets for being a rainmaker. How can you produce a sustainable, high revenue stream and build long-term wealth? Please join me in welcoming Harvey Meier. Harvey? You may be muted, sir. Yes, you are muted.
You had muted me. Okay, there we go. I think you all should be able to see my screen now. So
Yes.
welcome and thank you for inviting me to make this presentation and share some thoughts with you about my mindset. Perhaps some will appeal to you and others may not. However, we're going to be talking about as many as 10 today, depending on the time that we have. I tend to be a little bit long-winded, so Tom is going to cut me off and say move on if he feels that it's appropriate to do so, or we can answer some additional questions during the wrap-up program. So the first mindset that I have here is, and let me start with that. Number one, rainmaking mindset begins. What do I really think about when I think about what does rainmaking mean? And for me, it means, winning clients, getting the work, and generating the revenue stream that I desire to generate. So that's what it really means to me. But it all begins when I was thinking about what really has contributed, a mindset that's contributed to my success that I've had over the past 32 years as a full-time consultant. And it's been that I found out early on in my startup path here that putting my own self-interest aside for the benefit of the client was a very important mindset to keep in mind, and not even think about the revenue that was being generated or could be generated from a particular engagement. Another component there for me was that I started to really see my practice or my business model grow when I realized, just a second, I gotta shut my phone off here. When I realized that people retain me, not so much because of what I knew, but they retain me because of what they understood I cared about their best interests. And I know that's a cliche and you hear that all the time, but being able to practice that philosophy and getting people to like you, they will trust you and they'll begin to trust your judgment. And then you can get into what you really know. But they've got to really feel that we are, at least in my case, that I'm there for their best interest. And it's not about the money. And so that's really helped me generate long-term revenue and build wealth in my practice, build wealth as a result of my business model. One of the key mindsets that I have every day about rainmaking is this, and I say this to myself, it just repeats in my head every morning when I get up, that every day is a sales day. And what I mean by every day being a sales day is this, that networking that Dotty talked about, the referral portion of her business model is critical. And you saw the percentages of her total income that are being generated from those two components, referrals and networking. So every day is a sales day for me. It doesn't mean I'm calling on someone to make a sale or I'm closing a sale, but I'm networking with people. I'm touching base, emails, texts, a few phone calls along the way, just to stay in front of people. And the majority, I've never made a cold call yet to generate my revenue stream. I have called people that don't know me, but it's been based upon a referral by someone that does know me, or if that person didn't make the connection, I will call someone up and say, Joe recommended that I give you a call and introduce myself. And there's instant credibility that's already been attached to the referral source. So that's been my primary focus as far as rainmaking is concerned. I keep it up whether I'm driving on the road, I have my list with me, whether I'm traveling in between flights in the airport. I try to use my time as optimally as possible stay in touch and to connect with others. So that's my number one rainmaking mindset. Number two, one of the things that I think is really important from my perspective is to really be clear about why consulting is my business. And I view it as a business, not as a practice. I view it as a business because I need to produce a steady revenue stream to cover my monthly nut and to build long-term wealth for potentially retirement purposes and to live the lifestyle that I want to live. And I decided during my first year of consulting that I couldn't make a living doing what I was doing. I'd go back to work for someone else. And the first 6 months were very, very scary, so to speak, because I wasn't doing that. I was really dipping into savings, but because of the referral source, the networking and so forth, the practice took off during the second 6 months of that first year out. And since then, I've been able to generate six-figure revenue streams for probably the last 32 years, right from the very beginning, even though the first 6 months were tight. So it's a matter of a mindset that my business is consulting and I make it a business. I'm a monomaniac with a mission about it. And to the extent, if you really want to live the lifestyle that some of your clients are living, and my clients are primarily CEOs and boards of directors of privately held companies, then why couldn't I emulate the lifestyle I saw them living through my own business model? So that was my focus there. One of the things I think is important, and to me, is that really contributes to the long-term success I or other consultants I know who are at the top of their game, is that when we're talking to someone or a prospective client or even existing clients, we have to be able to project self-confidence in what I call a humble way. And I am known to be very quiet or very soft-spoken, and lately I've got to speak up more. But I like people to lean forward a little bit just to really pay attention to me and listen to what I'm trying to say. I smile, I look them in the face, and I ask what I think are really insightful questions. And during that process, I am not worried about what my business is about. I'm worried more about being able to obtain a level of trust and confidence in the person I'm talking to in terms of my ability. So I really try to focus on that. I think being able to project that self-confidence and self-image is really critical. And sometimes we can be tentative about that, which I was early on, and I was a little shy about doing all of that. But I found as I gained more self-confidence, my abilities, that really helped. And probably one of the most significant influences on my success early on during the first 5 years was the time that I decided I was going to attend an IMC national conference, their annual meeting. I was worried about that. I didn't think I had the competence level to really be there, but I thought I'd give it a chance. And once I got there and I started to connect with other professionals who'd been in the business and were kind of long in the tooth from my perspective, it really encouraged me to stay with it. I developed a great network. A lot of relationships, people reached out to help me, expand my practice. And as a result of that, I found my membership in IMC extremely valuable, and it still is. And I've got a national network with people I met during that process. So for those of you that may not have considered IMC National as a membership base, you might want to give that some attention. I think one of the things that I learned during that very first conference that has stuck with me for years is this. I went to a session on marketing, sales and marketing, and there was a speaker there. He was very energetic and so forth. And the one thing that stuck in my mind was the point he made that we need to be able to ask for the business with confidence, and that timid consultants have skinny kids. And that really resonated with me, may not with you, but essentially, we need to be assertive enough to ask for the business in a manner that isn't offensive to the prospect that we're talking to. And once that sale has been made, get up, leave, and don't outsell don't sell yourself out of that particular engagement. Sometimes we might talk too long and that's not too good. The next point I think is very important from my perspective, and that is promoting the why of your value proposition. And many times the tendency I've observed is, for me too, and perhaps some of you, is that when we're asked what we do or what we're all about, we start talking about all of the services that we can provide. And I've switched my thinking early on to be talking about thinking about answering that question from this perspective of why do I exist from the perspective or existing client's perspective. And so now when I tend to get asked that question, the way I handle it is I don't talk about what I do, but remember I'm dealing with CEOs, boards of directors, and so forth. And what I usually respond is that, my clients may very well be just like you. They retain me as their trusted ally to make good judgment calls and wise decisions. And that really resonates with at least my clientele or my target clientele. And then, I give some examples and I'll say, well, for example, I'm working with a CEO right now on this particular issue. And we've had, let's say, an X-year relationship and so forth. And I try to give examples of what we're really talking about. In addition to this, sometimes when you're having a conversation with someone, they've got a real issue on the table and they will say to me, well, how can you help us with that particular issue? And many times, I think some of us might be inclined to start rallying off exactly how we would attack that problem. I don't do that. Well, my response is, that's really an interesting question. That's something I'd like to really think about. I'd like to learn more about it. I'd like to continue this conversation or schedule a follow-up meeting in order for me to really understand what it is that you'd like to accomplish and what's contributing to your concerns. And I've never been refused on doing that, because oftentimes we're asked too, how much are we going to charge? And what's the cost going to be? And that's a question that sometimes might be challenging for some of us to answer. And I'll talk about that in just a moment, how I like to respond to that question. But I think the key that I'm trying to make here is think about answering that kind of question of why do you exist from that client or your customer's perspective, not in terms of what you do. I have a whole array of services I provide. Some clients see me in one arena, other clients see me in a different arena. So I'm like a chameleon with multiple hats that based upon the years of experience I've had. So there's a lot of services that I can provide, but first I really need to understand what is the client's need and how can I best serve that need. And if I can't serve that need, I'll tell them up front, and I'll refer them to someone else who's probably more suitable to respond to that need. One of the things that I've done is it's really allowed me to weather the ups and downs of the economy, the recession that we've had back in the 2000s, the pandemic. My practice is we've never missed a beat here in terms of the revenue stream. It's been consistent for the last 32 years, regardless of the state of the economy. And that's because I've developed what I call niche markets. And I have two primary niche markets, one here in the lower 48, and it's in the field of food and agribusiness. And I'm known as an expert in that food industry here in the Pacific Northwest. And then I have a niche market with Alaska Native corporations and Native Alaskan tribes. And I've created a niche market there as well. And when we were going through the recession, here as an example, in the mid-2000s, Alaska was booming, oil prices were great. You would never have known there was a recession going on in the United States or the lower 48. The situation's flipped now. So now Alaska is not doing and hasn't been doing well at all economically. So the revenue stream that I've had from there has dropped off significantly, but it reversed and picked up again here in the lower 48. So I've been very fortunate with those two niche markets. And I would suggest that if there's a possibility for those of you that are capable of doing so, seek out some niche markets where you become known as the go-to person, as the expert. And you'd be surprised how the referral sources come. My referrals all come voluntarily too, and that's what's driven my business over the years, primarily through that niche market presentation, presence. We're going really fast, aren't we, Tom?
Nice and brisk, man. Lots of time for Q&A.
Well, that's what I want to do. I want to leave time here for some questions and answers, and any questions is a fair question with me. I think Dotty really made the point here, create and nurture an active referral network. And that means maintain contact with everyone you know. I've become a member of the Chamber of Commerce, Rotary, trade associations, national associations, just because that's where a lot of referral sources have come from me. I've developed what I call co-marketing partnerships with other consultants, where we cross-refer business to each other, which has really paid off for me over time and so forth. And we partnered on projects, or else we just outright referred resources to our clients to each other. I lead peer groups in my niche markets, like a CEO group I founded 27 years ago, and we celebrated our 27th year at the end of this past December. And I launched a CFO forum a few years ago as well. So all of these resources eventually can feed business into you on a referral basis, and they establish your credibility in your marketplace. Number 7, and I think this is really important. I think it gets back to timid consultants have skinny kid, that concept, but it's about what I call avoiding compromising our value. And for example, when sometimes people will ask me, well, what's the cost going to be? I look them in the eye and I ask them, well, one, have you employed other consultants? And when they have, that's fine. Then it leads me to ask them, well, what's your relationship been like with them? And have you been comfortable with the fee structure? And whatever their answer is, that's all helpful information to me. But oftentimes what I really, if I've understood what their need is and so forth, I kind of laugh and say, I'm probably going to be one of the most expensive consultants that you've ever hired. And so it's interesting to see the kind of responses I get, because usually they laugh and I laugh, and I say, once we really understand what you're trying to accomplish, I think you'll appreciate what we are. And it's a little premature for me to quote a fee right now until I know more about what your needs are, and we discuss that, and we determine is there even a fit for me regardless of the cost. So I really don't like to mention the exact dollar cost up front. I don't bill on an hourly basis, all fixed fee project retainers or daily rates. And I peg my daily rate to what I understand. If they have legal counsel, I know most of them, I can usually find out what that, they'll tell me what they're paying their legal counsel. And I typically price myself at the same level their highest priced attorney is charging, because I perceive my value is just as important and valuable to them as is the attorney they retain. Sometimes I will price it down just a little bit under that, but I don't do it on an hourly basis or 6-minute interviews. I just quote a flat or a fixed fee, which I like. And typically, it takes a lot of time for a fixed fee, but I usually do it for no less than 6 months, and it's typically a year, and on a monthly fixed fee retainer plus expenses. And that way they're just sending me automatic ACS transfer to my bank account. I'm not invoicing on a monthly basis. Okay, so that's worked out really well for me. Sometimes they'll say, well, that's a little more than I want to spend and so forth. And I say, depending on the conversation we had, well, these are the things I understand that you would like to achieve and would potentially like me to assist you with. Which of these would you like to eliminate from the discussion we had? And that certainly would influence my fee. More often than not, they don't want to eliminate anything. So we go forward, from there. The other thing I do is I find that I have been timid at times, and typically, depending on where I am in my revenue stream and so forth, I might be thinking, well, I need the work, so I'm going to price it a little bit less. And what I end up doing before I open my mouth, I plus it by 20%. And every time I've plussed it by 20%, I've never had any pushback. It's the weirdest thing. But you have to have confidence in yourself to be able to do that. And I haven't had pushback, but and so I found I'm not overconfident, but that's really worked well for me. There are all types of revenue sources that we can draw upon to build long-term wealth and a high level of income. And these are in addition to just the consulting work that we do. And early on, probably at least 15 years ago, 16 years ago, I recognized that the tools and systems that I had developed, I felt really had value. And as a result, I was able to sell those tools and systems to another consultant for 16 years ago for six figures without executing a non-compete agreement. And essentially his business really flourished. We had like a 5-year payout. At the end of the first 12 months, he paid me off in entirety because he had really put those to use for him. It really surprised me that he did that. But he called me up and he said, you know what, I'd like to settle this up now. So it convinced me that there was real value to those tools and systems. The other thing that I've done is because of the relationship that I have with my clientele, I've identified some voids there. And because of my relationship with other professionals and so forth, I developed another business model in the accounting area that specifically is targeted to my network. And I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing, and the CPA is the person who goes out and delivers the services and travels to the clients. And we've done extremely well. For really, it's like a one-man business as far as delivering the services. I'm doing the back end and work with my existing clientele because I have the credibility, and we are doing, just extremely well, and he's doing extremely well also. And we're now in the process of seeking out another person, an accountant, to potentially join our firm and become his successor. So that's something you might want to look at when you take a look at monetizing your systems and processes. Some of you probably have written books, I'm sure, or you're in the process of writing books. And I've done that primarily targeted to my clientele's needs. And I don't sell those books on Amazon or any of the big publishers and so forth. They take far too big a commission or percentage of the sale. I sell direct, and I pay no commission. I send all my materials out using book rate, and I've made tens of thousands of dollars by doing it that way by myself right out of my little office here. And that's worked really well. That's an example of taking advantage of your resources and so forth to create a business model that produces revenue for you. Yes, you get credibility when you've written a book, and they tell me that when I first started consulting, you need to be a good public speaker, you need to be a good consultant, and you need to be an author. So you might think about how those different elements might be feasible for you in your business model as well. So number 9, moving on here fairly quickly, is what I call manage business and personal risk. And all of you, I'm sure, are doing that. You probably all carry errors and emissions insurance. I certainly do with the clientele level I deal with. Commercial liability insurance for all my documents and materials in my office. I have long-term care insurance I bought years ago. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to be needing that at some point in time in the future. I did have life insurance, but that expired on me. All my contracts include cross indemnification provisions, which limits the amount of my obligation if I was ever brought into a litigious situation. I use written contracts, which are very clear and about the expectations of both parties. I formed an LLC for my business, those partnership agreement, living trust, all the things that we're supposed to be doing from our own personal financial perspective that most people don't do, even if they're not in business for themselves, like disability insurance. I have that. I retain really good legal counsel, estate planning counsel, accounting professionals that I can call at any time, a good investment portfolio manager. All of these things are part of being in business for yourself that I would suggest, if you're not considering those, you might give those some attention to. And the last one that I want to talk about is this, what I called, let me go back here, just building wealth. And my philosophy from the beginning, I have never said no to any project. I don't care if it was $100. I never said no. And the reason I've never said no is because every contact that our company or individual I've worked with is what I call a potential referral source, even if it's not a big paying project. I'll stay up extra hours just to create a relationship and develop a relationship like that. And you'd be surprised how that pays off in terms of referrals to others. Forming a consulting or business partnership with another consultant, if there's an opportunity to do so, that might be something to consider. Partnerships are challenging. They can be challenging, but if you've got the consternation to deal with the emotions and so forth that come up in those, it's worth potentially considering. I think you've got to have a number in mind, for example, and what does it take to cover your monthly net? And monthly net is your business expenses and your living expenses as well, and make sure we strive to achieve that. The other thing that I found really helpful to my business model is that I've diversified my service or product portfolio, and I avoided what I call the one-trick pony type of offering. And I can be capable of providing multiple types of services or products. And I wear multiple hats, so to speak. It could be sometimes I'm doing executive coaching. I'm facilitating strategic plan. I'm doing executive search. I'm working just solely as a CEO trusted ally, just as a sole confidant to the CEO on let's say an annual or 2-year annual retainer relationship, speaking publicly, writing, and this whole concept of personally self-published books, and targeting my clientele network, my niche markets. So the other thing I like to do is I have a really solid target market database, probably close to 8,000 in my database over the years. And I regularly access them using tools like Constant Contact. I've used them for promoting some of the services I have, for my search projects, for my training programs that I put on, etc., like that, just to maintain visibility. And then lastly, when we talk about building wealth, from my perspective, in terms of my investment portfolio, it's made up of cash, stocks and bonds, and real estate. And I think that's something, as we take a look at future retirement and so forth, on a look back basis, that philosophy is really, and strategy has really paid off well for me, so that if the stock market goes down, I'm not going to be destitute. If real estate goes up like it is now, that adds to your long-term wealth. Maintain a certain amount of cash on hand for emergency purposes and so forth. And really thinking about your own business model from a financial planning perspective. So I was asked to cover all 10 in a short time period. I guess we had about 20 minutes, 25, 30 minutes to do that. And Tom asked me to leave it open for the last few minutes for questions and answers. And any questions, a fair question. Ask me whatever you want.
Yes, please. And thank you first, Harvey, very much for your brisk and concise treatment of an enormous amount of content. I'm going to stop your sharing so we can see each other a little better. And please put your questions into chat or raise your hand. Alex wants to be reminded what the first point was. And I think I know the answer. I think the first point was put your client first, essentially. Stop thinking too much about yourself and make sure you put your client's interests first, and they'll like that. Yeah, but did I get that right, Harvey?
That's right. And I see that happening all the time. The other day, as a quick example there, I was engaged to do a search process. We were talking about it during an earlier breakout and so forth. And the client, set the salary for the candidate and so forth. And I called the client and I told them that just was not going to, I was going to get them a mediocre client. I'm happy to do the search, but I can't guarantee they're going to get the kind of candidate that they want. And as a result, I know that when I do searches, if it doesn't work out, I've seen boards typically really be critical of the company or firm person that did the search for them. They're going to blame me. They won't take responsibility themselves. So I've got to either do it my way or not do it at all. And this would be like a $40,000, $50,000 fee. But I'd rather decline that than tarnish my reputation in the industry. So putting your client first is important. And also the point I made then too is clients really, at the end of the day, don't care so much about how much we know. They care about how much they perceive that we care about them and their best interest. And there's times when it might be hard to do that, but sometimes you just got to be able to put their interest ahead of your own. And if it means not doing the project, then you get to walk away.
Thank you, Harvey. Alex, did that answer your question to your satisfaction? And Paul asks, can you elaborate on executive forum, and are you still running those groups?
On what?
The executive forum, the CEO and CFO groups that you run. Tell us more about those.
Well, I started them with, these are with my niche market groups. They're not just general, but you see a lot of programs out there like Vistage, for example. You've all probably heard of Vistage, and then there's subgroups like that around too. And I back in 1993, I guess around that time period, I went out and I researched those, and I concluded that you're working for someone else. I'm not one that likes to work for someone else, so to speak. And if you're a facilitator, at the time it was tech, now it's this. If you're a facilitator for them, they're making a handsome revenue off of all of your work because you got to go out and get the clients and all that kind of stuff. So I decided to launch my own. I did that with CEOs, and these are all client CEOs. Their companies have been clients of mine over the years since that time period, but with changes at the CEO positions level, and they paid really good fee for doing that, and it's a 1.5-day session twice a year, and I price it fair, so it's not exorbitant, and they love getting together, and they refer me to other business. So that's an example. And then about 4 years ago, one of the CFOs of a former CEO client of mine called me and said, would I be willing to establish something like that for CFOs, which I did. And he ultimately became the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company this last August. So that's kind of how that works. It's a very straightforward, simple process, not a lot of preparation as far as facilitation. I've facilitated from a consulting point of view, no fees, whatever they ask, I respond to that I might be charging a fee for outside of the room, but I participate just like them, and they talk about me publicly with each other, and that generates more business for me.
Other questions, either type in chat or speak out loud or raise your hand. I know I'm curious. Go ahead, John Anderson.
I like your balanced approach. You cover many bases. You go from the marketing and the focus on the customer and your personal values and your professional values, all the way to your insurances and risk management and building wealth and treating your business as a business. That's an interesting, though, distinction of treating it as a business versus a practice. But the focus is you got to look at your own balance sheet. You got to look at your own profit and loss statement, and you have to treat your business, like your clients. And you're modeling. What you're doing is you're modeling and you're demonstrating and you're practicing what you expect others to do. Excellent. Good talk.
What I've heard over the years, and I don't have current verification of this, but the average gross income for consultants among the Institute of Management Consultants that I've been told recently runs around $60,000 gross a year. To me, without benefits. So now we're paying our own benefits out of that 60,000, and that doesn't, I couldn't survive with when I was raising my kids. It was a lot lower then, but still, and not how do you get to your retirement phase? And what happens with clients, and sometimes I have to explain this to them, might be helpful to you too, is they look at me, well, that's really an exorbitant fee and so forth. And then I say to them, well, let's take a look at where you're at. Because I normally know they're in the multiple six-figure ranges at the CEO level. And I say, well, I know you pay a lot of taxes on your gross. I pay taxes on mine too, but now I get to cover my medical, my health, my 401k plan, all the operating expenses out of the fee that you pay me. Whereas you get paid and all those things, and you get a car that goes along with it, it's all covered by the company. And they don't think that way. They don't realize they've never been in business like this for themselves. And once they understand that, the fee isn't a big deal with them, because they realize they get a better perspective about who we are and what we're trying to do. And then when they think about it, they say, you know, your fee isn't unreasonable, because when you take the third off of that, or a quarter, or whatever, 40%, I understand why you are where you are, and we go forward. It's the end of the discussion, but most people need to be educated like that. Now, one of the advantages I have over, I think, some other consultants, depending on their discipline, is I only work at the CEO and board of director level. So they are the decision makers. They spend the money, and I don't work below that. I don't target below that, because the people below that can't make the economic decision.
Other questions? Checking chat. I was curious, actually, Harvey, how you ended up in the niches you ended up in, because those of us who maybe not fully niched yet are thinking, well, just pick one. It's like, well, maybe I should put some thought into that. How'd you end up in the ones you ended up in?
Well, you'd have to say I was very fortunate. I grew up on a dairy farm in Western Washington, milking cows and so forth. And I decided I didn't want to end up there when I went to college. Okay. So that was number one criteria for going. And my whole career has been in the agribusiness arena. Went to Washington State University, graduated with a degree in animal science. I played college football there as a sideline. And then I went on, got a master's degree in agricultural economics, went into banking for a couple of years in California as a management development trainee, went back for a PhD in ag econ, was on the faculty at Oregon State University for 10 years working with agribusinesses. And then I went to the farm credit system in the banking business, and I started this business myself. So I've been fortunate, my whole career has been in that particular niche market. No one in my family has pursued that. My girls, I have two girls, they don't even really quite understand the agribusiness side of what I've been doing, because we lived in the city. That's where my wife came from, the city, but her parents, her family had farms in Illinois, but they don't really they don't quite understand the industry I'm in. But that's irrelevant. I've developed a good network in that regard. Some of the people we were delivering milk to, the companies, they are clients of mine, have been clients of mine over the years as well.
Sounds like you worked with the people you had at hand.
Right. So I had that, and then the work with the
Harvey, I'm sorry, I got to cut you off. We're just past the 5 o'clock hour, and I'm going to end the recording at this point, so that we keep our promise to folks that our program runs from 4 to 5 Pacific time.
Jerry had a comment. He was going to. Can you let Jerry make his comment? It flashed on the screen. Would you?
Fair enough. We had a couple things. Bill had something, and so did Jerry. But I'm going to let Jerry ask one of his two questions. Jerry, pick one, and then we'll keep talking, but it'll be after we formally close. And Jerry Fletcher's thinking about which one he wants to ask.
You want me to do it now?
Yes, please. That's
I wasn't a question for Harvey, because he and I have talked about this at length. This is just an observation. When Dottie was talking about, what's preferred, so on, in terms of social media, in my research that I do every year on consultants marketing, this year, what they said was they preferred LinkedIn. 87% of them preferred and used LinkedIn. Only 46% preferred and used Facebook. And Twitter came in third at 30%. So if you're looking for information about B2B situations, you're in all likelihood going to find better information and better connections on LinkedIn. That's all I had to say.
Outstanding. So as I was saying, we want to wrap up now at 5 or 5:02 to keep our promise on our duration. And we're going to stick around and keep asking and answering questions just off the record. So thank you all for attending.